Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. They debate about whether or not people like Nelson Chamisa should be held to account, rages on. This is a reply I got from one of the other commentators on the social media. And this can only come from somebody who really do not appreciate that all public officials must be accountable to the people. This is an individual who believes that leaders, in this particular case, Nelson Chamisa, is not accountable. The argument, I've heard it so many times. If Chamisa is irrelevant, why talk about him daily? If he is wasting people's time, ignore him. If he is weak, form a strong party. If he is tweeting verses, unfollow him. If you say he is sponsored by Zanu PF, give us the V11 forms or ignore him as you ignore Komichi. If you can't, then shut up. Well, only a shallow-minded nincompoop would make such an argument. Because what we are talking about here is public officials. Zimbabwe is a failed state. That is a fact that we cannot ignore. They say we have got to find answers to why Zimbabwe is a failed state. We cannot ignore that reality because the consequences of Zimbabwe being a failed state is that millions of Zimbabweans are living in abject poverty. Millions have been forced to leave the country as economic and or political refugees. And I believe many of them would want to go back to Zimbabwe. And they should have that option. And therefore, for us to ignore the fact that Zimbabwe is a failed state and try to find solutions to that problem would be foolish, to say the least. Because if we shut up, we are literally condemning those millions living in abject poverty now, and millions more in the future to live in abject poverty. Let me say this very clearly. Zimbabwe is a failed state, and this is a man-made problem. Of course, we must find out why Zimbabwe is a failed state. We cannot pretend that this is not a man-made problem. those in public office are the ones who are responsible for Zimbabwe being a failed state, be they in the ruling party or in the opposition. They are both responsible for the country being a failed state. In the case of Zanu PF, as the government in the last 45 years, yes, turned out to be corrupt, incompetent, and utterly useless. But people realized that by the late mid-1990s, that we have got a problem. And they came up with a solution. They needed an opposition whose number one task would be to implement the democratic reforms to stop the Zanu PF rigging the elections. This is where the opposition comes in, MDC CCC. We cannot say just because they sold out on implementing democratic reforms all these last 25 years, including the 5 years in the GNU, we should not talk about it. We should talk about it. They should account for why they failed to implement any reforms. We cannot deny that as long as we have got an opposition that has proven to be so totally incompetent and utterly useless, we are stuck. The individual is arguing, oh, form your own party, a stronger party. It is not about the party. In 2018, Zimbabwe had as many as 130 political parties. But that did not stop Zanu PF rigging the elections in the first instance, and the opposition participating, exploiting the weakness of the people because they convinced them that the opposition can win rigged elections. In 2018, Chamisa told the people that MDC alliance has stringent measures to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. And millions believed him. And they participated, ignoring the warning that participating in flawed elections would only give Zanu PF legitimacy and perpetuate the nation's suffering. Yes, the millions of Zimbabweans should not have been so naive, ignorant, and gullible so that they're easily conned. Yes, we've got to take those people to task. They should not be. But nonetheless, we cannot say people like Chamisa should be allowed to take advantage of the people's ignorance and despair. Because yes, Most of those millions who are suffering in abject poverty are desperate for change. And that makes them vulnerable to exploitation. We cannot pretend that people are ignorant and easily conned. But that should not be an excuse for saying we should let opportunists, corrupt, incompetent liars like Chamisa take advantage of them. All those in public office being held to account is a necessary tenet of a healthy and functioning democracy. Indeed, all the citizens have got a secret duty to hold those in public office to account. Zimbabwe is a failed state because instead of having a competent opposition, we have had the misfortune of having MDC CCC leaders who have been Zanu PF Team B in all but name, playing for Team A to win and for Team A to have legitimacy. Of course, we must hold the MDC CCC leaders to account for that. And it's only the nincompoops out there who believe leaders like Chamisa are demigods who should never be held to account. And therefore, then, whenever somebody holds them to account, they start fuming and frothing, angry that how dare you hold the demigod to account. It beggars belief that in this day and age, anyone would consider a mere mortal a demigod, much less somebody like Chamisa with a track record of being corrupt, incompetent, and utterly useless. Some of these people, they cannot accept that Chamisa lied about plugging the vote-rigging loopholes. Yet they accept that Mnangagwa and Zanu PF blatantly rigged the 2023 elections. SADC and the AU election observers confirmed the electoral process was flawed and illegal. So one comes back to the original argument. If Chamisa did not lie about plugging the vote-rigging loopholes, then how is it possible that Mnangagwa rigged the elections? We can't have it both ways. If Mnangagwa rigged the elections, then Chamisa must have lied that he had plugged the vote-rigging loopholes. And he did. That is what happened. He lied. Chamisa is a liar. As a public official, he must be held to account for it. Because it was only through his lies that he conned people to participate in a flawed process. Worse still, he is gearing to con people to participate in the 2028 elections and thus perpetuating the dictatorship, and thus perpetuating the political reality that Zimbabwe is a failed state. And somebody thinks we should shut up about it. No. We certainly are not going to shut up about it. As long as he's on the political stage, as long as he held public office and aspire to hold public office in the future, he is accountable. That is not negotiable. We cannot be wasting time discussing whether or not those in public office should be accountable. We've got other things that we should be getting on with. That should be settled by now. But alas, we're still talking about it. We still have some nincompoops out there who believe that their leaders should not be held to account. And they have the audacity to tell those who dare hold the people like Chamisa to account to shut up. I think it is a nincompoops that we must silence it once and once for all. I repeat, all those in public office are accountable to the people. Be they in the ruling party, be they in the opposition. That is not negotiable. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.